Now this is a build video and it's going to be from start to finish. You can see that I have all of my parts laid out here in front of me, and I'm going to have a link in the video description as to where you can buy these parts, and I'm also going to have a link for alternative parts because I've upgraded a few things and you may not want to, or you may not need to. So go ahead, if you want to just skip the whole video, you can check out the video description and you can part out your own and see what it takes to build. But if you want to watch the video, let's begin. So here is my soldering iron, and I also have my solder. You're going to need some zip ties, you're going to need some heat shrink, and I have various sizes in there. Here are my motors, and I got 5 of them just in case one of them fails or burns up, or let's just say I cross a wire or something goes wrong. I have one on hand so I don't have to wait to fly. Now here's my transmitter. I want the FreeSky D4R2 transmitter because it works with my remote. Now for this build I'm going to be using a Naze 32 board. It's the best board out, hands down. I have 2 of these batteries actually, these Nanotech 1.3 Turnigy batteries, 45 to 90 C. You want the high C discharge. A little heavier, but look how small they are. And you need a battery charger and a battery tender. So here's my battery strap. I'm probably going to Velcro this battery. The buzzer, pretty basic, it's cheap. It allows you to flip a switch basically and locate your quad. Obviously I have my ZMR250 frame. I went for the carbon fiber. Again, that was a slight upgrade, but I mean this is the Chinese frame, so I know people break these arms all the time, and I don't even think this is real carbon fiber. With the frame comes all the hardware, all the parts, but one thing to point out is Loctite. Super important to have this Loctite, blue Loctite. You're also going to want to use this Loctite on the motors because those motors vibrate and the screws can come right out. We've got our XT60 cable. Now I don't need these banana clips here on the end. I'll probably just cut those off and solder it directly to my power distribution board. Now for the power distribution board, went with the Luminaire power distribution board. Cheap, but it fits the ZMR frame perfectly, and it'll get the job done. So you can see here everything's nicely labeled. Let's see, we also need a small USB cord that will connect our Naze to our computer, and that's kind of how we calibrate the Naze before we fly. So you need one of these. I have my standoffs, my nylon standoffs. I have all different sizes that I could need. Here are my ESCs. I went with the Afro ESCs. Again, I have 5 of these just in case. I have my propellers. Now I actually have 2 sets extra propellers because these things will break eventually. A heat gun, and I already had this, but you'll need a heat gun. See if you can borrow this from somebody. This is so that you can activate the heat shrink when you're soldering your wires. Red LED strip. I'm going to be putting that on the rear end of the quad so it lights up red. And obviously you don't see my remote here anywhere. But again, I'm using the FreeSky Taranis X9D Plus. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much everything. I have my basic tools, a screwdriver. I don't have a vise, so I'm going to be using just these clamps. You don't see the video camera or the FPV gear. We're going to get into that a little bit later because we got to put all this together before we can even get to that. So let's get straight to it. The first thing we're going to do is put together the frame, or part of the frame. So let's get to it. Here's the frame and all the hardware. We're going to need our Loctite, we're going to need our hex driver, and we're also going to need some pliers. We're going to dump all this stuff out. Alright, so I've got everything nicely laid out and organized here. Put a little Loctite in there, just a little bit. And then we're going to take, doesn't matter which one of these plates, these pillars, and we're going to start attaching the pillars to the frame. Alright, now when you're finished, you should have something that looks like this. with all the pillars on. Now we're going to connect the motors to the arms, and we're going to make sure that we use Loctite when we do that. We're also going to do some soldering, and we're going to solder the ESCs to the motors, and then we're going to connect the ESCs to the arms. Here are the motors. Go ahead and take the motors out of these boxes like so. Each motor will come with its own little baggie of screws and the prop adapters. Okay, all these screws, and there's two different size screws in here. We're going to use the short ones. The long ones are a little too long for this build, and we're going to unscrew the top. Place that right here. Okay. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this piece, and it's going to fit right over top of this motor, just like that. Fit that on, snap it in place, and we're going to just turn it until it's lined up with those holes. There we go. And let's go ahead and screw that in. Now remember, we're going to want to use Loctite. I've got it right here. I'll just put a little bit right here. Again, you don't need much, but you do need it. There we go. Okay, so let's take one of these screws. So you can see, actually, it's hard to tell, but some of these are longer than others. Like there's a long one, there's a long one. So we're going to take these short ones. I'm just going to dip that in the Loctite just a little bit, and we're going to screw that in. Hex driver out. I'm just going to screw that in. Now before I tighten that all the way, I'm going to put the rest in there so that it can sit centered on the motor. So don't torque that down all the way quite yet. Go ahead and put in the other screws, get them all in there seated, and then go ahead and torque that down. Finished. You can see I have all 4 screws in there. I just connected this piece to the top of the motor, and I screwed in those screws. So, alright, so when you're done mounting all of these prop adapters, it should look something like this. You can see I have all 4. So here are all 4 of my motors, and they all have the prop adapter. Now the next thing we're going to do, we're going to attach these motors to these arms, and we do that pretty simply just by taking the motor, and we're going to take one of these arms, doesn't matter which side, you're just going to place it on these holes here, and you can see that the holes will just line up, these little holes right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the long screws this time. So let's go ahead and just take a long screw, get some Loctite, and I'm just going to stick it there. Actually, if you want to try and get these things centered as best you can see that. Tighten it till it becomes tight, and I'm going to make sure I go in a star formation so I get equal distribution. Now I'm going to torque them down just a little bit, not too hard. Remember, we could strip these. Finish connecting all 4 motors to the arms. It should look something like this if you're following along. Now just one thing to note is take a look at these wires here. These wires actually plug directly into the ESCs, and the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to attach the ESCs to the motors, and then we're going to attach them to the arms. Now you can see here, I just want to point out that these wires, they do just plug and play, and you could just plug these in. However, if you do that, you're left with all of this wire, and this is just gonna have to be bunched up, and I guess it would have to be zip tied or something, or maybe, you know, you'd have to do something like this, because the ESC has to fit on the arm, okay, something like that, and then basically the wires need to go somewhere else because the arm connects to the frame right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut these wires, and we're going to solder the wires directly to the motor. Real quick, here's the ESC, and I'm just going to remove a little bit of this extra heat shrink, just so it's easier. That's fine right there. Even that's pretty long, so I'm just going to cut all 3. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, there goes that. I'm gonna cut all these wires. That's good enough. How about right there? Okay, so those wires are cut. We can just get rid of that. There we go. And it'll reveal the wires, the silver wires underneath. Okay, if we don't cross any of these wires and we just hook them up just like this, the motor's going to spin one way. If we cross the two, let's say we cross this yellow and this red one, we go like that. We're going to have to do that. The motors will spin the other way. Just take some scissors. I'm just going to cut a little piece of heat shrink. 1, 2, 3. I'm actually going to put it on this side. A little bit more room. And we're just going to solder these wires together. Just like that. Whoop. Take this heat shrink up. Activate that heat shrink. So here we go. So watch this. We're going to zip tie that down, and that's nice. I mean, that's a nice pretty installation. So that's one. I'm going to do the same thing to another arm where I connect them straight, and then on the other two arms I'm going to cross the wire. So there, smaller. Do more soldering. Line that up. Just like that. Okay, so here are my 4 motors. I've marked the ones that have the crossed wires. So these are crossed, these wires are straight. Something like that. That'll work. Just like that. Real quick, before we put the arms on, we're going to put these standoffs on here, just like that. And the way that we do that is we take these nylon screws and some of these a little bit longer standoffs, and we basically put them through the frame just right here. So I've attached those, and what I'm also going to do is I'm going to take my receiver, which is this FreeSky receiver, and I'm going to put it right here actually. So it's going to go on the very bottom, and I've got some Velcro here. I'm just going to attach it using some Velcro. There we go. Just like that. And the reason why that's going to work is because these standoffs are just tall enough so that this can fit underneath. Here are the standoffs. The power distribution board will go on top, and then the nays will go on top of that. Okay, so I've just lightly taped down these ESCs just to hold them in place. We're going to go back and kind of redo all of this. We're going to tape up all of these wires and make sure that they're nice and snug. So we've got our 2 crossed wired ESC motors here. What we're going to do is we're going to lay these out on the frame. We're going to put them on the frame in the correct order so that we know which ones are where, and then we're going to solder these to the power distribution board. So let's grab our frame, okay, and I've already marked what I'm going to designate as the front, and I just put a piece of tape and an F. You can pick either side, doesn't matter. So motors, we're going to lay our motors out the way that we're supposed to. So the rear right is supposed to spin clockwise, and for these ESCs, that's a crossed wire. So I'm going to take this crossed wire arm, and I'm just gonna put it right here just for now, just so we know. Now this motor right here is also going to spin clockwise, and so that's a crossed. So that's the other crossed ESC. And then that means these two, just the straight ones, they're just going to go right here. So grab the other plate, right? And this plate is just going to slide underneath here. And we need our bolts. The rest of the frame, these are the frame bolts here, all the hardware that came with the frame. And we're just going to grab these long bolts. It's all that's left. I only have long bolts left, so we're going to grab these. And basically the way these arms go, this goes in between here. So I'm going to put a screw through there, and then put this screw just like that, because that's the way it's going to go. You get the point. Should look something like that. Alright, now we're going to take our power distribution board, and we're going to make sure that the power distribution board is rotated so that the battery leads are towards the rear. So if this is the front, this is the rear, battery that way. We're going to have to clip these little ends off, and these wires are going to go into our nays. So let's go ahead and just clip these wires, but you can see before we do that, we've got plenty of wire. If we clip it right there, it's just, they can reach. They can totally reach, so no problem clipping. Let's just go ahead and do that. And you can see here that I've connected my red LED strip just with a piece of double-sided tape. It's a double-sided foam, and I've soldered the red and black wires to it, and now I'm just connecting some spare wires that I have to the wires that I've already soldered to the power distribution board. So I'm running the wires from the power distribution board underneath the quad to the red LED strip, and I'm just soldering that all together and taping it up. The naze has a little arrow on it and it's pointed forward, so I'm just gonna throw it on in that direction. And I'm gonna use these little nylon bolts to fasten the naze in place. I'm just gonna tighten those down. Grab a Jst cable, and we're gonna just cut the end off of this cable. And we're gonna disconnect this white wire. We're just gonna peel that down. Take a pair of scissors and cut that little black piece off where the white is. And it's going to leave you with a black and a red wire with a modified clip at the end. I like to use this X-Acto knife to kind of shave off the end and make it nice. Go ahead and pick up your naze, and you can see on the naze on the back side it even says battery, BAT, and then there's a positive and negative symbol, and that tells you, which orientation this thing needs to go. And it just fits on like that. So next we're going to solder this to the positive and negative leads. I'm just going to solder it to these two leads here. And that just plugs in just like that.
Hi, this is David with helibatics.com. Today I'd like to show you how to do a quick binding of the FrSky D4R2 receiver with the Taranis X9D Plus. We've had quite a few questions on this recently, so I just wanted to make a video to show how this works. So first of all, we're just going to boot up the receiver while pressing the Failsafe button right here. You can use any pin set, just make sure you observe the polarity and put negative in the center like so. You can see when you power it up in bind mode that the red and green LED lights come on solid and stay on. So that's ready for binding. Now we're going to go to our radio.
Welcome to OpenTX.
And go to our model and up to the bind section. Now you want to make sure, first of all, that you're in D8 mode. It will not bind in D16 mode or any other mode. And then simply go down to the bind button here and press enter. And you see as soon as you do that, the red light begins to flash, indicating that you have bound. Now we just exit out of all the menus and reboot the receiver. And then you will see the green light here indicating that we have a valid link.
We get a green light. It's quite a feeble green light, but it's there. That means we're all bound up. And because I'm so close to the Taranis, the telemetry says it's lost, it's found, it's lost, it's found. Anyway, there we go. Simple bind process. Now, to set the failsafe on the FrSky gear, I'm going to make sure my throttle's down at minimum, which will be effectively cutting the motors. I'm going to make sure that it's switched to self-leveling mode, which is where I'll put the switch. And I'm just going to hold this down again, and we'll get a bit of a flash. We don't, I can't remember how. I can't remember whether it's you hold it down for long or just give it a quick one. So held it on for a long time, and I gave it a quick push. Now my failsafe should be set. See, that's the motor numbers, and then that will allow us to connect the right lead to the right pins on the nose board for our ESCs. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4. Pretty simple. So this is ESC number 1, and it's a bit of a tight squeeze getting this wire up here actually on this one. Notice these afro things are a bit short, but you can do it. The signal lead, that's the little orange wire here, goes to the top. And this is pin 1 here. This is the one starts here. In fact, oh, can we get it in? Yes, we can. Look at that. So it's a little bit, there's no tension on it, but it's, yeah, I'll run it over the top, make it a bit, yeah. Not really all that happy with that. These wires on the afros could be longer. It's a bit of a pain, but never mind. So this is number 2, and again, the orange lead goes to the top. In fact, I might just pull in a bit here so you can see more of what I'm doing. So the orange wire goes to the top, number 2. This is number 3, so this has to come here. And again, orange wire for the top. Now, if you have the straight pin 1, of course, you'll be plugging these in the top, but there's not a lot of space between the board and the top frame, so depending on what size standoffs you use and everything, so you have to tailor this a little bit to your own setup depending on your receiver and so forth. And this is number 4. So if you get these upside down, nothing bad will happen, but it always pays to try and get them up the right way to start with. There we go. So now we have our things.
Once you plug the small USB cord into the naze, go ahead and open up Google Chrome, and we're going to click on this little menu button in the top right corner and click on Settings, then click on Extensions, and we're going to get more extensions. We're going to search the Chrome store for Base Flight. Go ahead and search for Base Flight. Should be the first result. Base Flight Configurator, add to Chrome, add app. You can see that it just downloaded, it added the app right here. Double click that, and here is Base Flight. So the first thing we need to do is connect, and that should connect very quickly and just fine. So make sure the quad is on a flat surface. The first thing we're going to do is calibrate the accelerometer. So click that button. And once that's finished, we can go ahead and click on Configuration. Now here's just a reminder of the direction that your motors will spin. We've already been through this, so we should already have this correct, and we can test that in just a second just to make sure. Now on the right hand side, these are the features that I have selected. These are the features that I recommend selecting. The very first one is Enable PPM. The reason why I have to have Enable PPM is because of my FrSky receiver and my controller. Now enable battery voltage monitoring. Now this is that cable that we connected and we solder directly to our power distribution board, but in my case I don't have an OSD, so I won't be able to see the battery voltage anywhere because I don't have an on-screen display built into my quad. However, I highly recommend it. Don't spin motors when armed. I have that checked. Pretty important. We don't want those motors to spin. Enable failsafe settings on PPM, PWM signal loss. So this means if you go out of range and your controller no longer can pick up a signal, the quad will just default to the failsafe settings, which we're going to set, and that will be to cut the motors. Enable FreeSky compatible telemetry output. I have that checked. Enable battery current monitoring. I have that checked as well because I have the buzzer, which I'm going to show you in a later video. Here are my throttle configurations. You can see I have all of these set to 0. You can see my receiver I have selected as Spectrum, and pretty much all of these settings should be as they are here. Now I have my battery voltage pretty low, but I still think these are safe settings. Now here is where you would change your yaw adjustment. If on this screen you tilt it forward and what's going on? You tilt it forward and it's not showing it to be forward, so you would change this here 90 degrees, negative 90. I have it set to negative 90. You could set it to 180. Basically set that until this is correct. For the PIDs, here are my settings. I haven't really messed around with these very much, but these numbers should line up with yours. Alright, so go ahead and grab a battery and plug your battery in. Now once your battery is plugged in, you can see here that in the receiver when I hit the throttle goes up and the throttle goes down. That's on the stick that I want to be on. That's because I have AETR 1234 as my channel map. Now if you have your controls all mixed up in your throttle and your yaw and everything else is messed up, you're going to have to change to one of these other ones. So my throttle is on the left stick, you know, my yaw, my pitch, my roll, everything is on the correct stick in the right direction. So you can see even my switches are. Now if we go to mode selection, you can see that I have angle and horizon checked, and this is for the switches on my controller. So I have a switch on my controller, and when the switch is in the up position, angle mode is selected, which is the auto leveling mode. So we definitely want to make sure that that angle mode is green when the switch is in a particular position, because if it's not, it'll be in horizon mode or acro mode and it'll be impossible for you to fly. So there's plenty of videos out there on how to configure your controller so that you can program a switch and go ahead and make sure that just whichever switch you choose, angle mode, the auto leveling mode, is the mode you're going to want to fly in. So aside from that, you could probably ignore the beeper switch that I have enabled, because I have a beeper enabled. I'll show you how to do that in a later video, but for now it's really just that angle mode button. You just need to make sure that that's green for whichever switch that you configure it to. But besides that, click on save every time. Now for motor testing, you can see here that we can test each motor individually. So if we check this box down here at the bottom, right there, we can control the motors. Now the master will spin all the motors. Once that's checked, it'll spin all the motors, and remember, we don't have our propellers on, so this is no problem. The master will spin all motors, and they should all spin at the same time. Now if you wanted to, you could spin each motor. You could see the motor numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 at the top, and you could spin each motor at a time to make sure that it's spinning in the right direction. That's it. That's all you need to do. Now we can get out of here and disconnect. Now that we have everything connected, go ahead and grab your top plate and put these screws right into the top, into the pillars, and let's screw this top plate into place. So grab these screws, they're the only screws we have left in the box, and go ahead and screw those in. Here are the propellers. Now you can see that there's a right and a left. There's a little R on the propeller, and so the R propellers will go clockwise. So you want to make sure those go on the clockwise motors, and then the other propellers that do not have an R spin counterclockwise. So just make sure the numbers are on the top of the propeller, and make sure that the numbers are facing up when you put these propellers on. So there they are, 1 and 2. Now I recommend using bolts instead of the included cap screws. The cap screws keep coming off in my case, so I upgraded and used 5mm bolts. So I'm just going to put those bolts on by hand, and I'm going to torque them down with a wrench. You can't really go too tight. You just really want to make sure that these don't come off. Okay, now it's time to place the battery. I'm going to use some Velcro, and we're going to just stick that Velcro on the top. Okay, place a piece of Velcro on the back of the battery. I'm actually going to zip tie my power cord to one of the pillars here just to kind of keep it in place. So I'll just zip tie that right there. Okay, now I'm going to place my battery right on the top. And you can see here that maybe I can use another zip tie for this power cord just to really make sure that it doesn't get caught in the propeller. Okay, and I've got my battery strap. Just gonna put that through the frame and make it nice and tight and make sure that that is secure. Okay, now plug it in and we're ready for a test fly. Now you just want to make sure that this cord can't get caught in the propeller, so make sure that that is nice and secure.
Welcome to OpenTX. Switch warning. No battery.
Good.